Two players in the portal that would be perfect fits for Oregon.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Indiana is very different than Texas Tech. In the first segment, I'm going to give you a break from what I assume for most of you like me is the looming stress of the Indiana game on Friday. Though exciting, it definitely is. And I've got to do individual standouts and trivia because this is a Tuesday show and that's the way we roll. So let's start with two guys in the portal that would fit Oregon's potential need very well. Amare Campbell and Cade Uluave. So these guys at linebacker were the respective leading tacklers on their teams, Uluave from Cal, Campbell from Penn State, in the 2025 season. I don't think there's a position group, presuming Dante Moore comes back, which is not a given, although, just throw this out there as well. The quarterback musical chairs has gone around and around and around, and Austin Novosad is gone. And right now, quarterback 2 in 2026 is scheduled to be Brock Thomas. And I'd be fine if he's quarterback 2. He's clearly capable in that particular role. But I have not seen or heard any major buzz about Oregon going out and getting a portal quarterback. Not in the last few days. Josh Hoover's gone to Indiana. Sam Levitt's looking at a couple of different places. Oregon was reportedly in the fold there. I've heard they made some offers to a couple of other guys, but those guys have found other homes now, and the market is not as hot as it was literally 48 hours ago. And it makes me think, given that Oregon has shown the ability to go out and recruit guys at a high level, that in the portal, that if they're not being directly tied or even loosely tied to a major quarterback prospect, that they think internally Dante Moore will come back, regardless of how the season ends. And I'll tell you straight up, if Oregon does win the national championship and Dante Moore leaves and there isn't a good quarterback plan, I got to tell you, I won't really care. It will be that exciting and thrilling. I won't really care. 2026 will be the most gravy football season I can imagine. At least I say that now, and then once August rolls around, I'm sure I'll feel differently. But linebacker, I think, is the spot where a transfer would make the most sense. Now, it's not as if you don't have guys in that room. I don't think it's such a need that if Oregon doesn't fill it, the position group is a glaring weakness. It's just slightly more of a question mark, though not entirely, because you could bring Devin Jackson back for another year. And Jerry Mixon has still got a couple of years of eligibility. And the young guys behind him have battled injuries this year, but in the spurts that we've seen, there's some real potential. I think Dylan Williams has looked the best of the bunch in the few snaps that we have seen from him, Kamar Mathuti and Braden Platt. But and Gavin Nix has been in that room, the true freshman, getting some snaps as well. But losing a guy like Bryce Betcher, who's been the quarterback of the defense, I think, along with Dylan Thieneman, and has just been such a leader, a stalwart, your leading tackler, and so productive, and has played so well over the second half of the season after the linebacking unit struggled a bit in the first half. Guys like Uluave and Campbell would make a lot of sense. Now, between the two, I think Uluave is safer because he's not coming off of an injury, but Amare Campbell is a guy I'd rather have. So you might remember against Penn State watching number 24 in the blue and white in Happy Valley run around, make plays on the field. Unfortunately, I think he got hurt in that game, actually, but if his medicals check out and they expect him to be at 100%, I think Campbell's a better overall player. But Uluave's been at Cal for the last 3 seasons and was their leading tackler. He had 97 tackles this past season. Neither one graded insanely high on PFF for those that care about that sort of stuff. Uluave actually had just a 61 overall grade this year, but again, has played a lot of football. And I think more than anything, if you were going to add a player like this, it would be to bring a veteran presence into that room, bring a level of experience that doesn't otherwise exist. Now, I think it's perfectly feasible as well, when you look at that position group, that you could just roll with either Jerry Mixon or Devin Jackson as kind of the new Bryce Betcher, the guy who's kind of been working under the clear linebacker one for a season or two and is ready to take the reins. Bryce did that from Jeffrey Bassa, of course, from 2024 to 25, and Bryce has done very well. Maybe they feel like either Jerry Mixon or Devin Jackson is ready for that. I would guess Jerry Mixon, frankly, who's, I think, been better and more impactful than Devin Jackson and has passed him on the depth chart this year. But maybe they feel like in the offseason, Jackson, who's older by 1 year, would be a guy that's more ready to go. That's the number. See, I paused there. You hear that? You see that? Because I think about these things a lot. And then I start airing takes and I go, well, could offensive line be the number one need if Dante Moore is back? I think you can make that case. I think you can absolutely make that particular argument, because you're losing Prenon, you are losing Harkey, and you are losing World. Now, I think one of those tackle spots will be filled by one of the tackles that we saw this year, whether that's Janoris Wilson, who unfortunately has been out for a while with an injury, or Fox Crater, who stepped in against USC, looked awesome, or maybe even Kavika Rogers. I think they probably want to have Kavika Rogers be a depth piece sort of guy. He has been the last couple of years, and he's done well in that role and has had some really important moments, including but not limited to the USC game this year. But Emmanuel Prenon was on a number of different All-American teams and was an all-conference guy. And look, I think Emmanuel Hanicho is going to be an absolute dude on the offensive line. And he could play guard or tackle, especially on the O-line. I know some folks might jump and say, well, look what Brandon Finney did this year. Could you have expected that? No. For him or Naeem Offord, I could not have. I don't know how I would have made that particular prediction that Brandon Finney would come in and not just start all year, but be Oregon's best corner by a pretty significant amount and be as good as he is. He is having the cornerback version of Penei Sewell's true freshman season. And Penei's the guy that comes up in this conversation. Can a true freshman be ready to go up front? Even for highly rated guys like Hanicho, it's really hard. It's really hard. Some of you might remember the name Brandon Baker. Brandon Baker was one of the top offensive tackle recruits in the class of 2025. And he was down to Oregon and a couple other schools, including Texas, where he wound up going. And I'm just going to pull up his PFF grade this year. Not bad, but not great either. 65.6. So below what you would call being a good player. Struggled in run blocking in 873 snaps. 77.7 pass block grade is pretty darn good. Josh Connerly was a similar type of high school offensive line recruit to Emmanuel Hanicho, and Connerly did not start as a true freshman. And by the way, is one of the best left tackles that Oregon has had in the last 10, 15 years, maybe of all time. I mean, he was a first-round pick, for goodness sake. That has not happened very often on the offensive line. In fact, in my lifetime, I think it's just Penei Sewell and Josh Connerly. So that's why I hesitate to jump and say, well, it could be Hanicho. I mean, he was at the All-American game or some big national, and he was getting all sorts of plaudits, and Brian Smith was texting me going, man, this guy looks awesome. He looks really, really good. He was going up against some of the best edge rushers and performed really well. Yep, I get that. He was not going up against the 21-year-old future number 5 overall pick in the NFL draft. It's a different level. So I think you can certainly argue offensive line is a top need, but linebacker I think would make a lot of sense to just have a veteran presence who's got a proven level of production. I'd be down for Amare Campbell. I'd be really, really down. I don't know if Oregon has made any overtures or moves in that direction, but I think Uluave could be a solid addition as well. I just think because maybe the young guys didn't play as much as the staff was planning to have them see the field this year because they got dinged up with injuries. I think putting a guy like that in the room for a position group that has been solid but not elite this year, I think that would make a lot of sense. But if you think offensive line is a bigger priority, hey, let me know in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. All that good stuff. However you want to get in touch. So, the break from talking about Indiana is over, and they are just much different than Texas Tech. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. If you've had a financial goal you've been wanting to get to and you feel like it's just out of reach, you just haven't quite been able to get there, Rocket Money is here to help you do just that. You'll love how it tracks your subscriptions and lets you cancel them right in the app so you're not wasting money on services that you aren't actually using. That and many more tools will help get you on the right financial path, and Rocket Money is here to help you do just that. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Check them out at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. It's all caps. It's all one word, locked on, LOCKEDON. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. The vessel by which those on YouTube are seeing the second segment sip consumed might tell you a thing or two about what time I'm recording the show. Just throwing it out there. So, Oregon hasn't been noisy in the portal, unless you count Bailey Ettridge, of course. Some of you probably thought I had forgotten about the Nevada transfer. Absolutely not. He's another Australian punter. Got James Ferguson Reynolds' seal of approval online after the move got made. Said, Duck fans, you're in good hands. And I said, well, you know, James, I have loved what you've done for the Ducks this year. A couple of well-executed fake punts. Should have had a passing touchdown if not for a hold in the Wisconsin game. But he's punted very well. Done a lot of great things. Should we take him at his word at face value? Well, kind of seems that way. So Ettridge comes from Nevada. Probably looking to win some football games. They went 3-9 this year in the Mountain West. He had 47 punts this season. Averaged over 44.5 yards per boot. He has got a big leg and an accurate leg. This is just a good, solid move, and I will never be one to downplay the impact of special teams for Oregon going into a given season. I think we've seen that play out a lot this year. Joe Lorig has been great. He is down 18 punts inside the 20 compared to just 2 touchbacks and had 14 punts of 50 or more yards with a long of 62. I come across a lot of punter stats. That's real. That's good across the board. I'm here for it. So that's the only transfer news as I record the show that Oregon has made. And will they be noisy? I mean, Indiana is getting ready for the game on Friday, and they added a bunch of guys. They found their quarterback, receiver, running back, and a couple of defensive players. And Oregon's sitting there. So far, so good. We'll see if that changes. So let's talk about Indiana, who's very different than Texas Tech. A couple of questions to get to, then I'll get to my individual standouts and trivia later on today's show, as per our usual arrangement here on a Tuesday show. This question came in. How does the defense we just faced versus Texas Tech stack up to Indiana in your opinion? IMO, that's in my opinion. That Texas Tech D-line was nasty, as were the linebackers. The Indiana defense was not shutting our run game down like Tech was. We just went away from it, and the Indiana defense seems more about scheme than elite talent. Good take. Good take. That is not to say Indiana doesn't have talented players. They have guys that would absolutely start for the Ducks. D'Angelo Pons, their corner, would start opposite Brandon Finney. Aiden Fisher at linebacker absolutely would be the best linebacker on Oregon's team. And I love me some Bryce Betcher, who just had a great game against Texas Tech. Up front, Stephen Daly was actually one of their best guys on the interior, and he unfortunately got hurt. I don't know if you guys have heard, crappy situation. He was celebrating with Indiana fans, jumping up to give them high fives after the Big Ten championship game win over Ohio State, came down, hurt his knees, out for the year. And that just sucks. He's just a moment of joy turns into a moment of despair. Like that, absolutely sucks. It absolutely gives me at least a smidge of confidence more that Oregon will be able to run the ball again, because they did run it well. 3 guys averaged 5.4 yards a carry or more in the Indiana game. And I agree. I agree that Oregon went away from the run game too much against the Hoosiers. And Indiana's defense is different. So what makes Indiana's defense so special and so good, and a big reason why they're favored against the Ducks on Friday, according to our friends at FanDuel, by 4.5 points, is that their ability to generate pressure without blitzing extra guys with what are called simulated pressures is really, really good. And it's a difficult thing to try to block. And I'm watching my guy Mike McDonald, who might be the coach of the year in the NFL, do the same sorts of things. Now, Seattle's front four in the NFL is very good. Indiana's is good. Don't get me wrong. But it is the scheme and their zone coverage and the way they disguise and the way they are well coached, and they just do so many things well. That is what it's more about. Because Oregon ran the ball against Indiana, and Oregon could not run the ball against Texas Tech, which was my number one key to the game. But they hit the other two. So that was a good thing to see. But yeah, it's different. It's a different type of matchup. It's a different type of challenge. It's a different type of opportunity for the coaching staff to show how many different ways they can win a football game. So yeah, the Texas Tech D-line, definitely better than Indiana's. I don't think the gap is, the gap between Indiana and James Madison. I definitely think of the 3 playoff opponents, Indiana's defensive line is solidly second, Texas Tech's is first, and I think Oregon should be able to have, especially after, how they played. Jake Butt made a good point on yesterday's show that there's going to be some motivation for that Oregon offensive line after how they got manhandled in the run game to come out and move some guys around. So hopefully that winds up being the case. But yeah, it's fascinating. There's more than one way to construct a good football team, win a football game, and Indiana, Texas Tech, great examples of that. Here's an SSA. I have an SSA for you this week. Analysts have commented on how far Oregon has to travel for each of these playoff games. I argue from watching this season that Oregon plays better on the road. What's your SSA on that and the potential it will have going forward? I don't know if I'd say better on the road. The defense on the road has been really good this year. That is absolutely true. You go back to the Penn State game, the Texas Tech game going all the way across the country, the Washington game, the Iowa game, they played about how you'd expect. Yeah, the offense away from Autzen Stadium has not been spectacularly good. I mean, let me just pull up the schedule real quick so I don't miss a game. I hadn't really thought about that a bunch until I said that out loud. So Montana State, Oklahoma State, obviously those games are at home against inferior opponents. Northwestern, offense kind of started slow, but got its footing and led that game 34-0. That was on the road. Offense, only 3 points in the first half at Penn State. Offense played very well at Rutgers. Their defense not very good. Iowa, tough conditions. And then Washington, wasn't weather related. It was just the scheme of that Washington defense took away the Oregon rushing attack, and they moved the ball up and down the field a bit and settled for a bunch of field goals and won the game with defense and special teams for the most part. So I do like that Oregon is able to win a lot of different ways. They've been tested in those spots. We saw that on Ducks versus them. I've never seen a butt whooping that was so close. Dan Lanning's so great. That was great. He didn't use that word, but we're a G-rated show. So I think that what Oregon's offense is going to face against Indiana is as good of a test as they faced all season. I mean, Indiana was their worst offensive performance, 13 points. 13 offensive points. I think from both an eye test and statistical standpoint, Indiana was the worst. Well, now you're playing a team for a second time. And are you able to make those sorts of adjustments? And I got to tell you, as I record this show on Monday morning, I am anxious about the game, like many of you, incredibly nervous, excited about the opportunity. But I definitely have this lingering thought that Will Stein is going to have to bring his best game to the table his game plan, and he and Dante Moore have to have the answers for the way that Indiana plays defense. Nobody has so far. Their defense hasn't allowed more than 15 points in a game. Oregon got 20, but 7 of those came from the Oregon defense. So they have to have their best game, and Will Stein has to have at least 40% of his attention diverted to being the head coach of Kentucky with the transfer portal open. I don't love that. I got to tell you, when I woke up on Monday morning and started thinking about the game, I did not feel great. Maybe that'll change throughout the week. But Oregon plays better on the road. The defense has played well in both spots, special teams as well. I think that's a 5. It's a coin flip. I don't think there's a ton to it because it's been more about the caliber of opponent and the type of defense you're going up against than it has been where the game is being played. That's my answer to it. So, how about this? Funny SSA for you. Oregon needs all the luck we can get for this rematch against Indiana. I think that starts with all black uniforms. Off the top of my head, feel like we've played the best games in all black. Well, USC 2009 is the most famous example, of course. Washington 2010, Oregon actually played poorly in the first half when they were ranked number 1 for the first time ever, but then got things rolling and blew them out in the second. What other All Blacks have they had? The Penn State and Ohio State games haven't been all black. They've had a lot of black, but they have played well in those games. So, will there be... I'd like to see a decent amount of green. But if you mix green with black, honestly, you know what I'd like? First of all, the SSA, just off the top of my head as well, I'd probably give that an 8. That the black uniforms have led to Oregon mostly playing well. I'd like to see the throwbacks from Washington State return. That or the Washington uniforms from earlier this year. Either one. I think either of those would look great and be fitting for the moment. So, yeah, I needed that fun SSA to lift up the show a little bit, Can't come on here and be a Debbie Downer. Can't do it. Not intentionally, anyway. Okay, individual standouts. And, yeah, Oregon's going to need these guys. I can only do this segment after Oregon plays a game. I don't think I'll do it after a potential loss, but after every win, at least not a loss that ends the season. I don't know. We'll see. Get into off-season content. Got to talk about something. But the portal will be open. The college football calendar is so dumb. Literally, it just moved the national championship up to early January, open the portal 10 days after the season ends. And don't let coaches let coaches leave first, then open the portal. It's so... Someone needs to figure this out. Anyway, I like going beyond the obvious. Brandon Finney, of course, was a standout. And Dante Moore was, of course, a standout. And Bryce Betcher and Dylan Thieneman both had 12 tackles in the game. Each, not combined, each. So, yeah, those are the obvious ones. I like going beyond the obvious for individual standouts. And you know what? I'm starting with Atticus Sappington and Luke Basso, who, according to Mel Kiper Jr., is one of the top long snapper prospects in the upcoming NFL draft. Bet you didn't know that, but I did. He and Atticus Sappington can't have a good field goal without a good operation. James Ferguson Reynolds, I believe, is the holder, and Atticus Sappington hitting that 50-yard field goal. You can't overemphasize the importance of getting momentum there. Can you imagine if Oregon had put together that drive, converted a 4th down, the 3rd long to Jamari Johnson, and all of that, and almost getting a touchdown? If they'd walked away with 0 points, sure, I think Oregon still wins the game, but it's a game of momentum. It is an absolute game of momentum. And getting on the board there, icebreaker. And Dan Lanning has to trust those guys against Indiana, especially early in the game. You got to get points every chance you can because they're just not going to be easy to come by against Indiana. And I don't think there's a blanket philosophy that should be adhered to. You should always take the points. You should always go for it. No, you got to read the situation. And as I said after the last game, I think Lanning probably went for it one too many times. The Ducks were 4 of 8 on fourth down. That probably should have been 4 of 7. And they still won the game 23-0. And yeah, it was actually closer than that because that late touchdown, I think Texas Tech had thrown in the towel a little bit. But yeah, Luke Basso, the long snapper, you can't execute a fake punt or a field goal if he's not on the money. Dude's been on the money. And I don't think we should take for granted snapping the football. You know, if that snap comes back to James Ferguson Reynolds and is a little bit high or a little bit low, he's not going to throw that fake to Tatum Tuioti. Heck, he might get the kick blocked. So, shout out Luke Basso. Probably the first time I've mentioned his name here on the pod. Jaden Lamar. The best play call that Will Stein had all day was on the 3rd and 3 in the fourth quarter, and Lamar picks up 27 because he'd been in there to block. And by the way, in the runs where he was in there to block, thought he did a decent job. But that play deserved mentioning once again. Other guys, both offensive tackles. Early in the game, I was very concerned. I think most Oregon fans were. Boy, can't seem to block Romello Height and David Bailey. They were getting pressure. They were sacking Dante Moore. Did you notice, or did you just not fully process perhaps how after the first quarter, those guys were not getting pressure on Dante Moore all the time? Oregon's offense struggled because it shot itself in the foot and couldn't run the football. But it did not struggle from the second quarter on because David Bailey and Romello Height were roaring off the edge and pressuring Dante Moore. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. They were giving him enough time to throw. And Dante was doing a good job of getting the ball out of his hands quickly, which negates a good pass rush. We've seen that with a lot of teams' game plans against Oregon this year to try to take Tatum Tuioti and Mateo Uiagalelei out of it. But those guys got punched in the mouth early, and it looked bad, and they made adjustments and deserve a big, big shout out for that. Jerry Mixon was active in this game. He is not the most physical linebacker out there. It's another reason why I'd be okay with bringing in Uluave or Amare Campbell. And by the way, Uluave could go back to Cal. Dan and Tosh might be battling for his services. We'll see. But Jerry Mixon is not the most physical, but man, dude's a good tackler. He's kind of like a safety playing linebacker, but he's really crafty. He's really athletic. He's just not a guy that's going to take on a block from an offensive lineman or a tight end, blow it up, and make a play in the backfield. But he's going to make a good ankle tackle. And he had a couple of really good moments in the game. I think he had 2 TFLs. And I thought he also had a pass breakup. You know, he had that blitz. He realized, I'm not getting home. He reads the eyes, jumps up, boom, knocks it down. And Oregon's been great at that with both their linebackers and the defensive line this season. They've done a great, great job of batting down passes from quarterbacks that are not particularly tall. Now, Mendoza's not going to allow you to do that because he's 6'5", which is why he's going to be a top pick in the NFL draft. But yeah, Mixon had 4 tackles. 1 was behind the line of scrimmage, and he had 2 passes defended as well. Jerry Mixon, I think, quietly had a good game. And then you want to talk about quiet? I don't think he's actually in the box score, but he deserves credit. And that guy is Ife Obadegwu. So when you hold a quarterback to 137 yards on 18 of 32 passing, 2 picks, no touchdowns, a big reason for that, unsurprisingly, is that his guys are not open. They were not available to throw the football to. And after the second pick, he realized, well, can't just be looking at Brandon Finney because, boy, it seems like that guy's going to make a play each time. Well, the logical next step, if you're a quarterback, is I'm going to attack the other corner. Well, those guys weren't open either. If he did not make a big mistake in this game, which has been his problem this year, he's not an elite tackler, but he hasn't been, I don't think he had a tackle in the game because they weren't able to run the ball out there because of the rest of the defense. It's easier for your corners to not have to tackle when Dylan Thieneman is running around making a bunch of tackles. But yeah, I had to shout him out because I felt like I talked about just about every other secondary player except him. And it takes a complete effort because if you've got a weak link, offenses are going to take advantage of that. And if he was not a weak link, and I will once again stand by that he should play over Theron Johnson. I know that if he is imperfect, he'll get beat a couple times. I think he's a better player. PFF agrees for whatever that's worth to you, but I think it backs up what a lot of us have seen if he's a better player. But again, let's trust the staff because they know what they're doing. But Time for trivia to wrap today's show on a Tuesday. This is a good one. I mean, a really good one. Oregon I got a lot of great submissions. Could only pick one whenever the offseason comes around, which is hopefully not until January 20th. I can start working them in more regularly at the end of the show, but for now it stays once a week. But this is a dandy. I got a lot of good submissions. Thank you guys for doing that, but here we go. Trivia. Oregon has won 5 New Year's Six Bowls starting from 2012. Name the defensive MVP from those matchups. So let's start, of course, by identifying the bowls. The Orange Bowl, against Texas Tech, the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty, the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, the Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State, the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin again, and 5. There we go, 5. 5 New Year's Six. I was looking at the 6 and I was going, wait, what was the 6th game? Yeah. Oh, starting from 2012. Whoa. But wasn't the Rose Bowl at the playoff against Florida State also in there? So, okay. I'll just guess from every single one of those games. So, obviously, Brandon Finney from the Orange Bowl this year. The Fiesta Bowl from a couple of years ago. Ooh. I'm going to come back to that. The 2019 or the 2020, I guess, Rose Bowl against Wisconsin with Justin Herbert. I believe that defensive MVP was Brady Breeze. Florida State's got to be in there, right? Got to be. Starting from 2012. So that must not include the first Rose Bowl against Wisconsin. I'm going to presume that's what you were going for. I should have asked for clarity on that question. That's okay. So that means the games are the Rose Bowl against Florida State. Oh, and then there's the Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State, the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty, and the Rose Bowl again, or in the Orange Bowl against Texas Tech. So I've got Brandon Finney, I've got Brady Breeze from the Florida State game. I'm going to go Tony Washington for the defensive MVP. He had the scoop and score from the 2013 Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State. Who would the defensive MVP have been in that game? Kiko Alonso. I think Kiko was the MVP of the 2011-2012 Rose Bowl as well. So, but we're not doing that one. I'm going to throw it in there anyway. So I'm going to put, but was he the MVP for both? That would be crazy. Kiko was definitely the MVP of the first Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, so I'm just going to throw that out there. Against the Fiesta Bowl, who would it have been? Casey Matthews, maybe? Was he still around? No, I think he left after 2011. I'll guess Deion Jordan. For 2012 against Kansas State. And then for, the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. You had Evan Williams on that defense. Steve Stevens had an interception. Would that have been enough? Roderick Pleasant recovered a fumble in that game. Defensive MVP. Would it have been Brandon Dorlus, Jeff Bossa? Ooh, it could have been Jeff Bossa. I held Liberty to 6 points. There was a pick. I'll go. You know what? He had a pick. I'll go with Steve Stevens. I don't think that's right. I know a couple of those are right. I don't think all of them are right, but interested to find out. So that's how we wrap today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.